Hello and welcome. Today we'll be working on this Kitsune page of mine and we'll be practicing a backlit effect. Now, some of you here in the Coloring Club have already taken my Fantasy Glow Effects course, and you did a backlit effect with a fairy, so you know a little bit about how backlit effects work. However, not everyone has taken that course, so I'm going to take this step by step to explain all the magical effects that are happening. First of all, backlit effects are all about contrast, so it's extremely important to work on toned paper. I don't care what color paper you pick, nor do I care what color combo you choose for the whole composition. I'm doing all of this in pink because I'm going through a bit of a pink phase right now. But as you will see by the end of the lesson, this effect can be done in any mood and any color whatsoever. Some of you will choose to do this in purple or black even, or multicolor. It doesn't have to be one color and a very basic color combo. However, I'm doing mine in pink. So as always, I encourage you to follow along with me first time around, just to get a feel for how the colors lay down, for how the colors combine and connect, and the effect that we achieve with those colors. And then on your second time round or your third time round, however many times you want to do this, bring in your own colors and start to experiment. But I'm going to say this over and over again throughout this entire show. This effect is all about contrast, not color. So, starting on toned paper, any color toned paper at all, we are adding white charcoal to the actual element that glows. We have a main light source here, and the light source is the window behind her. For those of you who have not taken the Fantasy Glow Effect course, the main object that glows will be the lightest. We can't make our paper actually glow, but we can create an illusion of glow. And the way that that illusion is made is that the lightest possible element is going to be pure white, regardless of the color of light. I'm going to repeat that. Regardless of the color of the light source, whether it's an orange lamp or an orange candle or a red lantern or a green Christmas light, it doesn't matter. Whatever the light source is, the hottest, brightest part of that light source will always be white. It's the peripheral colors that will reveal the actual color of the light source. So in this case, our light source is something that's behind that window. It could be artificial light, it could be daylight, it doesn't matter. There's light coming through the round window behind her. So the best thing that we can do is make it pure white. But notice what I'm doing here with my white charcoal. I'm not just coloring all the way to the edges of the window frame. I'm coloring a little bit past it, creating that diffused look. Please look at a bunch of reference photography for lighting. There are millions and billions and trillions of beautiful photographs featuring all sorts of lighting out there. You can look at art photography, window light, diffused light, artistic light. I'm just throwing those out there as a for instance, but please start being more comfortable with your own searches so you can find your own rabbit hole of images to go down to and see what reference photography suits your needs. Another good one is golden light photography. As photographers, we try to catch morning and evening light. That's when the sun is either rising or setting, and it creates a beautiful diffused and actually visibly golden light. Golden hour photography is super common. It's very popular. It's the most attractive and flattering kind of lighting. So if you just Google search for that, you'll come up with a lot of beautiful examples. But what I want you to pay attention to in your visual research is how there are no clean-cut edges when it comes to beautiful artistic lighting. Everything's a little bit diffused around the edges, and that's what's going to make your coloring look like a magical painting or a magical photograph rather than just a straight up coloring. So what we're paying attention to here is filling in those squares of the window in as pure white as possible, and also diffusing the edges, meaning go over the edges just a little bit. Now, usually when I teach these effects, I tell you that it's okay to not work with white charcoal. If you prefer a white Prismacolor pencil or any other kind of a white pencil, that's fine. But on this one, I'm going 100% white charcoal. I don't think you should be substituting this with any other tool. This is the tool that makes this effect happen. White charcoal is super available, it's super accessible, it's on Amazon, it's in every single art store, and it's really affordable. So if you really want to make this effect come to life on paper, you do need these basic elements. You need toned paper and white charcoal. Now, applying the white charcoal to the page is also extremely important. The way that you apply it is extremely important. Notice how I'm holding my charcoal stick. At this point, some of you are probably asking, can I use a white charcoal pencil? Because I don't like the white charcoal sticks. And yes, theoretically you can, but once again, I'm going to push a little bit harder on this one and say that the white charcoal stick is the better way to go. Mainly because it's just thicker, so you can apply more of your pigment faster and smoother without those pencil scratch marks. I also feel that the white charcoal stick smudges better with a Q-tip than the white charcoal pencil. I think the charcoal pencil may be just a little bit more condensed for the sake of being in a pencil form, for the sake of being easily sharpened, as opposed to the stick form where it's just pure white charcoal in its original chemical form. So I would go for the stick. And notice that my stick isn't sharpened crazy sharp. It's not a needle point. It's actually quite a bit dull. And I'm also angling it very severely. This is a 45 or even smaller, maybe like a 35-degree angle of the surface of the page, which gives me a lot more surface area on the tip. And that is how I'm able to color in this very, very smooth application, no scratch marks, and pure white. Now, some of you have been reporting back to me that you have issues applying white charcoal to the page and having it stick. And I've been able to trace that back to the actual brand of paper that you're using. There's a lot of crappy paper out there. I'm sorry to say that, but a lot of stuff that we buy at Staples or Walmart or any kind of a non-professional store, not a professional art store, is going to be low-grade paper that's not actually designed for a lot of this media that we use. So be careful when you choose your paper. For your basic Prismacolor on white paper kind of a look, yeah, you can use pretty much anything from Walmart and Staples and all of those places. But if you're going for these professional artistic effects with professional art tools, you're going to need professional art paper. If you want to make art, you have to use the correct supplies. So I'm a Strasmo girl 100%. However, what I'm working on today is not Strathmore paper. Case in point, this is cardstock paper from Michael's, from an art store. So it is artistic paper. It's not crappy from Walmart, but it's not my favorite. It's okay. I would call this paper acceptable. This is cardstock. Strathmore, unfortunately, doesn't come in all of these beautiful pinks. It only comes in tan, gray, white, cream, and blue. And their blue isn't really blue. It's actually kind of gray. It does not come in pink. And I really wanted pink paper for this particular project because that's my undertone. Everything is going to be pink. So I bought a whole bunch of these cardstock papers ranging from very pale pink to this very dark magenta pink that you're seeing as my under paper. And the reason that I'm saying that this paper is acceptable, not excellent, is because yes, it's great for all the media that I'm going to be applying to it. It's great for white charcoal. So make a note of that. Cardstock is good for charcoal. It's great for colored pencils. I've tried this paper with Prismacolor pencils, with Black Widow pencils, and with some nameless brand, really cheap stuff from Amazon pencils as well. And it works well with all of those. However, I'm not very pleased with how the print comes out on cardstock. So that's important. If you're doing a print that's really highly detailed, and if you're looking to print grayscale images, cardstock is not ideal. Here, the lines came out well enough. You can see all the details on her face, on her hair, and on her dress. But the grayscale, well, in my case, purple scale, uh, background image of the window frame has a little bit of a warped texture on it. So anything that's thicker than a line for regular printing on my laser jet printer isn't coming out very high quality. So I would not print grayscale images on this paper. If you're doing grayscale, go for Strathmore paper. So back to the people who were struggling with this kind of clean application to their paper, this kind of a clean white charcoal application to their paper. Having discussed that privately with those individuals, we've come to a conclusion that the paper that they're using is just not artist grade paper. So either cardstock or Strathmore, and then you will get this nice clean look. Now that I've diffused my background light with my Q-tips, I'm going to work on what we call in photography a hair light. A traditional way to light individuals for interviews is to have their face well lit. Obviously, there are multiple ways of doing that, but additionally to add this little rim light or hair light. We do this by actually physically placing another light source behind our subject, and it creates this beautiful outline, like a little halo around the hair. This is why it's called a hair light. And that's literally what I'm doing right here with all of the tails of my kitsune. So a very basic rule of thumb here is outline everything. The closer to the light source, the more your outline is visible. But we're doing the tails as well as her. Consider what you're actually drawing and coloring. What is the effect that you're trying to imitate? We're creating an illusion. Don't just fill in the blanks. Think about it in three-dimensional terms. There's a light source behind her, a very strong light source. It's actually light traveling from behind the window, through the window, and past our character. Where will the light hit? Where will the light seep through the different elements? We can see that it seeps through a little bit between her legs. It seeps through a little bit between her tails. It will probably kind of wash out the tips of her ears. So the light spills. It doesn't travel cleanly. There's a little bit of a light spill everywhere that light is visible. It is diffused. So no clean edges on this effect at all. Notice that I try to create gradient transitions as much as possible with my white charcoal on its own before I add my Q-tip work. This is a very time-consuming process. This entire coloring took me between 3 and 4 hours to complete, and I work extremely fast. So I don't expect you guys to do this in an hour or two or in a time that you take just to follow along with me in the video. Please also pause as often as you can to catch up, because there will be parts of this video where I skip through certain parts or where I speed up through certain parts just so that I can cram all of this into 1 hour. But please do remember that it took me 3 to 4 hours to complete this, and that is with a person who works extremely fast. It's perfectly okay to spend multiple days on this. It's perfectly okay to spend the entire month on this. Speed is not a measurement of success in this effect. The effect is the measurement of success here. So a lot of you are new to this technique, and for you it will take a lot longer. So be very careful with your gradient transitions. Try to make your light as smooth as possible. Look at how I'm applying the white light all the way up to her shoulders, creating that clean cutoff where she's not lit at all, but there's that diffused light that's seeping through around and behind in that tail area. And now I'm going to continue with my rim light all around the fur on all of the tails. It's already looking like there's a light source behind her. Take your time with this. Make it as smooth as possible. If something doesn't feel right, if you feel like your white charcoal is patchy, if it's peeling off, something's wrong. Either you're applying way too much pressure or your paper is simply wrong for this effect. But I guarantee you that if you use General's brand white charcoal on tan toned paper, Strathmore brand, then you will have no problem with any of these effects. Once again, the cardstock paper is a little bit more advanced. It's a little bit more difficult to work with, but it is doable. That's what I'm using right here. And the only reason that I'm using it is so that I can get the pink color. If Strathmore came in pink, I would absolutely pick Strathmore over this cardstock, whatever brand it is. All right, this is looking good. Please pause here and assess, what are you seeing on the screen? What are the decisions that I made here, and why does it already look like it's backlit? Literally, ask yourself all of these questions. We can't create illusions unless we understand what is the illusion that we're creating. So why does this work? It works because of contrast. Could you do this backwards? Could you do this on white paper? Theoretically, yes. But once again, I hope you're paused on the screen right now, and I hope you're looking at the amount of white in comparison to the amount of pink that I have on the page right now. Imagine that you are working on white paper, and instead of using white charcoal for our light source, you had to fill in all of these pink areas in this very smooth, gradient-free, complete pink fill. Imagine the process that that would take. Would you enjoy that process? How long would it take? Would you be able to actually see in your mind which areas need to be darker and which areas need to be lighter? For me, that's not a good way to work. For me, it's a backwards way of working on glow effects. We are drawing light, so it makes more sense to add light to our page rather than to add shadows all around it, making the white of the page our light source. That's just me. If you want to try it the other way, the backwards way, go for it. I'm never going to hold you guys back. And I think that absolutely anything can be done on paper with pencils. Anything at all. This is a very limitless media. You can create all sorts of effects. As you learned last month, we can even make our pencil colorings look like impressionist paintings. We can make our pencil colorings look like black and white photographs. All of these effects are possible. So yes, on white paper, a backlit effect is absolutely possible. I've done it, millions of other artists have done it, but it takes a lot longer and it brings out an entirely different skill set. So for this lesson, for the purposes of this effect and follow along with me, please try it my way at least the first time round. And once you understand how it feels my way, then feel free to turn it upside down and all around in any which way that you want. I will always encourage you to experiment. All right, now that we have this done, let's start adding some color. I'm working with this brand that somebody recommended that is a budget brand from Amazon. I will be putting up the pencils that I'm using on the screen to show you the name of the pencil, the number of the color, so that in case you have the same brand of pencils, you can follow along with me. Or if you're a kind of person who likes to match names of colors to other brand colors, which by the way, I don't recommend, but I know that some of you do have that habit already. So just in case, I will be putting up the names and numbers of the pencils on the screen, but I want you guys to approach this differently. I want you to really understand what is the color that I'm choosing, and very specifically, what is the darkness of the color that I'm choosing. Because remember, backlit effects, any kind of light effects, are all about contrast, not color. So in this particular pencil set, working with my color palette, which is all pink and burgundy and purple, this is the colors that I went with for my first undercoat, base painting, underpainting, call it what you will, layer. And what I was looking for in selecting this color, it's not about I want a purple that matches to Purple Haze in the Black Widow set or something like that. No, I want a color that's a middle tone, That's a little bit on the purple side, a little bit on the grayish side, nothing too extreme. I don't want a neon color for this. I want a very natural shadow looking purple. So when you select your colors with whatever brand you're working for, I want you to make sure to look for a feel rather than for a name and a number. That's very important. These effects, they're all about the feel. And that is why we're doing this coloring here in the Coloring Club. And I'm not doing it for free on YouTube because the YouTube crowd, they're not ready for this stuff. This is advanced. Nobody's going to actually listen to my advice. But you guys here, you're all dedicated to perfecting your skills. You're all dedicated to actually learning and pushing yourselves a step further every single month. That's why I'm doing this effect with you. It's way too advanced for YouTube. Now, the color is chosen. It's kind of perfect for what I'm looking for. It's a nice mid-tone, very diffused, but the important part is where and how to apply it. This is going to be very difficult for a lot of you. We have to treat the entire composition, the face, the hair, the ears, the clothes, the tails, everything as a single object, not separated into skin tone, hair color, dress color, and all that. Imagine that the entire thing, the girl in her outfit and her hair and all the details and the furs, everything is carved out of clay. And that is what you're coloring. You're coloring a clay figurine with no painting on it. Once you start thinking about it that way, you'll be able to apply your shadows more freely. That's the first complication. The second complication is that because it's a backlit character, our darkest shadows will be in the center. That's how it works with backlit subjects. The center is the darkest and everything coming out to the periphery is the lightest. That means that all the way down the center of our character, her torso and her face will be the absolute darkest elements of this composition. And for many colorists, that's a huge struggle. And that's a psychological struggle, not a technical struggle. The psychological struggle is that we see the face, and the face is the single most important thing for us. We connect with the face defines the character. So for us to add more shadows than what we're comfortable with to the face feels like we're actually taking away the information from the drawing. So you have to work through that psychologically as you're creating this coloring. Again, don't treat it as a face, don't treat it as a skin tone. Don't differentiate between fur and hair and the silk robe and skin and all of that. It's all in your mind right now, made out of the same material. Let's say it's clay. Could be marble, could be felt. I don't care. Create whatever story you wish in your own mind. But do tell yourself that every single thing in this composition is made out of the same material and it's all the same color. There's no difference between the color of her face or her coat or her furs or anything else there. Understanding that, we can apply the shadows correctly. So watch where I'm placing my shadows and how much darkness I'm creating in the middle of my character. When it comes to her kimono, do not get tricked into coloring every single little flower petal there. It's not about that. Again, I want you to concentrate more on the overall shape rather than on detail. If you color over everything and completely ignore the flowers, I would rather see that. As long as the shadows are placed where they belong and the whole subject looks three-dimensional. I would rather see that than see all the little details or have the flowers be all different colors and stuff like that. The backlit effect is about contrast. Like I promised, I will be saying it over and over again throughout this entire show until you guys get sick of it. In real time, I am 48 minutes into this coloring. That's my speed. That's my time. If you guys are 3 hours into this, that's perfectly fine. If you're 3 days into this, that's perfectly fine as well. Do not rush it. Some of you color a lot slower, and there's nothing wrong with that. Some of you color a lot faster, and that's not necessarily better. It just is. We all have our own speeds. Remember that I've been doing this my entire life, literally every day of my life. Some of you are brand new to coloring. Some of you color only once a month. Some of you only started a few months ago. It doesn't matter. Color at your own speed, and remember to have fun. This is a fun effect, and it's going to look mind-blowing when you're done with it. If you post this on Facebook, post it on Instagram, whatever social media you post your work in, even in Tom, people will be completely blown away when they see this. They will not know how you achieved this effect. And that's kind of the point of the coloring club. I've probably said that before in my recordings. The point of this club is to have you guys create colorings that will absolutely blow people's minds, so that when you post them, the responses will be like, how did they do this? That is the point. And of course, to have fun. And of course, to learn to apply these effects to other colorings by other artists in other books and all that. Once you understand how the backlit effect works and why the illusion works, you'll be able to apply it to anything at all. In this drawing, for instance, there's a very clear candidate for a light source. We have a window behind her. Windows tend to be sources of light traditionally in drawing and painting. You may, however, be working with a page from a book where there is no window. There's just a character on a background. But I want you to be able to look at characters, to look at pages and see the potential in them. If you have a page with just a character and a blank background, give it a light source, give it a backlit effect, you don't even have to draw out the window. You can just add the light and use all of these beautiful diffused effects, add the rim light and so on, and then proceed to add your shadows. But I cannot stress this enough. It will not work if you don't make your character super uncomfortably, unusually dark in the center. That is the whole secret to backlit effects. I'm going to show you some of the colorings done by my students from the Fantasy Glow effects from the backlit character section. Well, it's actually the fairy section, but in the fairy section, we did one backlit character effect. I want you to look at these, and some of you are actually here in this club, so your work is featured, but many of you have not taken the course yet. I want you to look at these works and see how far the students took the darkness in the center, and to see just how extraordinary that effect looks. You cannot be scared of going dark. Now, in this particular composition, in my Kitsune composition, I'm not going as insanely dark as I did with the backlit fairy, because I imagine that this isn't actually nighttime. It's not like it's complete darkness and there's this window with mysterious light behind her. No, the window is so brightly lit that it makes me think that it's daylight. So probably there's ambient light all around her in whatever space she happens to be in. So we'll see still a lot of the detail of her face and everything like that. But the backlight, the light that's behind her, is so strong that it will make her a little bit silhouetted against it. So it's a slightly different situation than it was with the fairy, because there is a lot of ambient light here that's helping bring out all the detail and keep the color. But in other situations, like with this fairy, for instance, sometimes you have to go as far as to destroy all the details of the face of the character completely with your dark colors, as some of the students have done very successfully. Look, the original drawing here has so much detail. The character is well drawn out, and it's very tempting to just go all in and give her a nice little skin tone and some makeup and some eyelashes and all that stuff. But that would be boring. That's the kind of stuff that people color every day, and we see thousands of those colorings posted on social media. Taking it a step further and going as far as taking out all the detail of the face and completely silhouetting the character, combining that effect with the hair light, the rim light, That is brave. That is bold. The message is still there. The character is still there. It doesn't matter that we can't see the details of the eyes and the lips. We can see that this is a female character. We can see that she's a fairy. She's still shaped exactly the same way. We can see that she's very elegant, very sexy. All of that information is still there. But the overall presentation is so bold, so brave. But once again, these effects only work if you take them as far as you need to. You have to go dark. Notice that the tails on the bottom of the composition are noticeably darker than the tails on the top. Why is that? Before I just straight up answer the question, please pause and think about it and drop me a comment. Let me know why you think the tails, the lower tails, are so much darker than the upper tails. Hopefully you figured out that that's because the center of our light source isn't perfectly centered on the character. It's a little bit elevated. The center of the light source is kind of around her chest area, and that's where all the upper tails are. The upper tails are directly in front of the light source. So a lot of the light is spilling past the tails and creating that pool of light between the fur and the girl. However, the tails that are lower to the ground are actually below the line of the window. Some of them are up against a wall, so there is no light shining behind them. That's why we have this gradient transition from perfectly lit and backlit, overlit tails on the top and shadowed out tails on the bottom. I am now an hour and 15 minutes into this coloring, and I've added only 2 pigments, my white from the white charcoal and whatever color this grayish lavender color is. It doesn't matter. Notice that I don't look at names. I don't look at numbers. I don't even try to name them. This is the color that spoke to me. This is the effect that I saw in my mind. And that's the colors that I went for. I want it to be a middle tone. The full potential of this pencil is not very strong. It is a mid-tone. It is darker than the base of my paper color. And it is just dark enough to create my shadows in contrast with my white light. So this right here is our underpainting, the combination of the white and this lavender mystery gray shadow pencil. This is our underpainting. What this represents is the perfect placement of light and shadow on this backlit character. Now let's have some fun and add color. For my first color, I'm going with deep dark burgundy. Again, staying in my pink realm, that color choice made perfect sense. If you're working in a purple realm, then go with a deep dark purple. If everything is going to be blue, then go with a deep dark blue. If you're just doing grayscale, which is perfectly fine and a very cool effect, then go with a really dark gray, like an 80 or 90% gray. And still, we are treating the entire composition as if it's made from the same material. Pause right there. Look at how dark the effects on her face are. They're just as dark as the effects on her hair. It seems ridiculous. She may look like a jester right now with those little round red cheeks, but go with me. Try to copy exactly what you see on the screen, this exact intensity of a color. It seems weird right now. It seems unnatural. She looks like she has a horrible sunburn. That is fine. Suffer through it. What's the worst that can happen? And with this color continuing to work on everything, I am starting to add a little bit more detail and differentiating a little bit between where different colors will be ultimately. For instance, the little silk outline of her kimono, the fabric that's different on the kimono is a little bit darker now. The inside of the sleeves is a little bit darker. Her hair it's suggested with my coloring that her hair is darker than the color of her skin. The inside of her ears is very dark. And I'm going to proceed to add this dark detail to the actual designs of her dress. Now, the level of details that you're going to add to her kimono is entirely up to you. If you don't feel like outlining all of these little flowers, which by the way, at this point are very hard to read because we've colored over them, so I'm actually freehanding most of them. If you don't feel like doing that, don't do it. It's not important at this stage. Placing light and shadow is way more important. But for me, I'm comfortable freehanding. I mean, I drew the thing, so I know exactly where the lines are and exactly how I want it to look. So I am very comfortable just adding these designs all over again. If you can't see them so well at this stage, don't worry about it. Just skip it and just color the kimono in a solid color. But me, I kind of like to show off, so I'm gonna give her as much detail as I can with this pencil. At this point, I do have my pencil sharpened very well because I'm working with detail. So I'm going to give her all these little flowers here on the kimono. And then I'm going to show off even further and do the little traditional Japanese design on the belt. And that too is entirely unnecessary unless you are a detail-oriented person. If that's you, this is a time to play. This is a time to add all of these little effects. But I don't want you switching colors yet. Stay with this color. The kitsune tails, the way that I imagine them, is that they're actually light fur, perhaps white, and they have red tips and stripes. That's how I envision them. And that is where I'm placing my lighter and darker areas. It doesn't matter what color they ultimately are. Like I said, I imagine them to be white, but look at how dark the bottom tails are. That is because they're backlit. The tips are now a little bit darker and the stripes are a little bit darker, but I'm still honoring that hair light, that rim light. So there are a lot of things happening here that you need to keep track of. We have gradients within each tail, and we have a giant gradient transition going from the bottom of the drawing to the top of the drawing. The tails that are hanging low are much darker. They're almost entirely in shadow. And the tails that are on the top are much lighter. They're a little bit blown out by that light behind her. Look at what's happening on her legs. Her knees are completely dark. And these dark areas that you're seeing, like on her hair, on her belly, on her knees, the tips of those tails, that is the full potential of my pencil. Very important. It's not about the color. This could have been blue or purple or any other color that you can imagine, as long as it's this darkness. When you try to match this effect, make sure to match the darkness above all. And once you find a pencil that matches that darkness, make sure to actually honor the full potential of that pencil. If you pick a 90% gray that's very dark, that's almost black, but you use it only to the 10% of its potential, if you barely touch the page with it and you just sketch a little gray area, then that doesn't count, right? Because that's not the effect that we're going for. We need to use this pencil, our third pigment on this page, to its full potential in the darkest areas. That looks amazing. We need to go even darker. To make my center shadows look even darker than they are now, I'm bringing in a dark blue. The kind of blue that I'm using here is a type of an ultramarine blue. It's very dark, a little bit on the purplish side, and mixed together with my burgundy, it creates an absolutely beautiful shadow effect. So where am I adding my darkest blue? I'm adding it to all the areas that are already established as the darkest, and I'm making them even darker. Blue is always a good idea to add to the shadows regardless of your overall color scheme. Even though my whole thing is pink, I'm adding blue to the shadows. If your whole thing is going to be green or violet or all natural colors, not one color scheme, you need to add blue to the shadows as well. Unless you're working with black and white only, then obviously don't bring any blue. If your whole composition is going to be grayscale, then stick with grayscale. On that note, if you are doing the whole thing in grayscale, work on gray paper. There's no compromise there. If you're doing a grayscale drawing, work on gray toned paper. If you're going to work on tan toned paper and you want to make it monochromatic, then go with your sepia colors. I am now 2 hours and 4 minutes into my coloring. The blue was a faster effect than the rest of the work that we've done so far. As we add more and more colors at this point, they will take less and less time to add because the effect is pretty much done. This is a backlit character already, but it's not vibrant enough. I want to make sure to add some colors to it to show that it is a colorful composition, not a monochromatic composition. For instance, I want the tips of the tails to actually be red. I want to have some red in her kimono and on the mask that she's holding. I want to have more peachy tones on her skin. I want to make sure that this is actually a colorful character. But notice, it's not that we added all the colors first and then added light and shadow. That's never going to work. It's important to establish your light and shadow first and then start adding your colors. So the light and shadow are now perfectly established. Nothing needs to be changed. Nothing needs to be tweaked. Only now, 2 hours into my coloring, I can start adding other pigments. So something peachy or creamy, lots of colors like that in every single color set. And I'm using that as a blender for my skin. Not a lot of it, just here and there. And a little bit on the tails as well to take it more into that peachy pink realm. Very subtle effect, but look, we're already heading towards a colorful look as opposed to a monochromatic look. And now with the red, for the red, I want you to choose if you're following along with me with my colors. If you want your tails to be blue or green or purple, then obviously choose blue or green or purple. But if you're doing my effect, then I want you to choose a nice, clean, classic red. Think pop art red lipstick, that kind of a red. That's what we want here. And again, gradients, gradients, gradients. There are no line-to-line coloring segments here anywhere. Everything is diffused. Everything is transition into a transition into a transition. Apply your colors gently. Apply them over and over again until you get the level of pigment that is necessary for that particular effect. Be gentle. Don't rush this. If you feel like you're getting tired or if you feel like you're getting bored, set it aside, come back tomorrow, do some more work tomorrow. There's no need to rush this. This is a precision piece. It needs a lot of work. I'm adding red to her cheeks, to her mouth, to all the little areas that I want to actually be red. And look, as I added that red blush to her cheeks, all of a sudden her skin doesn't look so dark, does it? Remember when we added the purple to her skin tone to begin with and it looked completely obscene? Now she just looks pale skinned. Why is that? That's contrast. We made her hair very dark with that burgundy and blue, and we added those really obnoxiously red cheeks and added red to the mouth. And in contrast with all of that, her skin looks natural and pale. Like I said, I want the tip of the tails and the stripes to be red. And more magic is happening as we color. All of a sudden, adding that red to the tips and the stripes makes the tails look like they could be white. Now I'm going to add red to the silk parts of her kimono. Actually, the whole thing is probably silk, but you know what I mean. The whole edge, different fabric texture thing, the little outline of the kimono fabric. We're going to make that red. We're going to make the insides of the sleeves red. And of course, we're going to add red to the mask because the mask, the kitsune mask, is traditionally white and red. That made quite a difference, didn't it? Now it is very much a white and red character. Even though we invested 2 hours of our lives into coloring everything with that base purple to begin with. That was our shadow work. Remember that we were working on a backlit character. I am adding a neon pink now to her kimono just for fun and because I want the whole thing to come across as bright pink. So that's my personal choice. If you want her kimono to be a different color, now is the time to play with different colors. If you want it to be green, you can add green now. If you want it to be blue, you can add blue now. It's entirely up to you. I find a single color scheme a stronger choice for something like this. I think bringing in a different color for her kimono will take away from the overall illusion. So I would recommend sticking to one color mood. Put the whole thing in blue, put the whole thing in purple, put the whole thing in pink. But like I said, experimenting is great. Different colors are great. So I'm not going to tell you that this is the only way to do it. I'm just going to say that that's the way that I prefer to do it and that I think is a much more powerful look. So a little bit of color variation is okay. For instance, I have my variation with purple and pink and red, but it's all in the same realm. All of these colors are very close to each other on the color wheel. I'm not picking things like green and red and blue. That's a little bit too colorful for this particular look. It's going to take away from our contrast. It's doable, but I feel like it's going to take away from the contrast look. Now for my white, I'm bringing in white once again, and I'm bringing it with a white Prismacolor pencil. And this step is optional and up to your judgment. For me, I'm just cleaning up some edges here because I think I can make them even brighter with my white pencil. With Prismacolor specifically, I am able to remove the outlines almost entirely. So that's what I'm doing. I'm going over all the outlines. I'm highlighting that hair light, that rim light, and I'm going to add a little bit of white details here and there to the entire composition. And why Prismacolor? Because Prismacolor pencil is the only pencil that I have, that I know, that I've tested, that actually adds white highlights over everything and anything that we've done. So you may not need it. Your white highlights may already be perfectly placed. If that's you, then skip forward to the next step or keep adding your colors. But for me, there's still some contrast work that needs to be cleaned up here and there. For instance, this tip of the sleeve could stand out against the background of the tail just a little bit so that it's readable. Remember, I always talk about that checkerboard pattern. An object up against another object should have that contrast dichotomy, a lighter against darker, darker against lighter, and so on. So I'm going to add a few more details just to make her silhouette a little bit more readable. And that work is all done with a white Prismacolor pencil. Bringing in white charcoal at this stage will not work, unfortunately. White charcoal only works on clean paper, not over pencils. And that is why we start with it. Would a white gel pen or that nail polish thingy or white acrylic paint work here? Yes, it would technically, but it would not achieve the same effect as what we're looking for. Gel pens, acrylic paint, white nail polish, Copic thingy, all of those tools are very sharp-edged tools. Not like swords, sharp-edged tools, but they create very sharp and clean edges. Even if you diffuse your pigment with a Q-tip immediately, it's still a little bit too stark, it's still a little bit too sharp, and we're going for very soft lighting, very diffuse lighting, so I would not bring in a gel pen on something like this at all. All right, I am happy with my white highlights. I am going to pause, I am going to assess, and I'm going to ask myself, how can I make this a little bit more interesting? Does it need anything else, or is it done? It kind of looks done, but I feel like I can take it a step further if I add just a touch of golden light. I imagine that this is actual daylight behind her. And like we discussed in the beginning of the show, one of the most beautiful lighting scenarios is the golden hour. So to imitate that golden hour, that sunrise or sunset behind her, I'm going to bring in something like a canary yellow. And I know that in the beginning of the show, I said that I'm working with the budget pencils, but it looks like at the end here, I've actually just straight up switched to Prismacolor. This is Prismacolor Canary Yellow. And I'm adding it very gently, not to its full potential, just as a little bit of a sheen over everything. And this very lightly added canary yellow. If you feel like you're heavy-handed and you're afraid of adding too much yellow, pick a lighter pencil. I have very good control of my pressure, so I can work with darker, brighter, more saturated pencils to create these little diffused looks. But if that's not you, if you feel like you're too heavy-handed, go with a lighter yellow, like a more pale yellow. If you are feeling brave, go for it with a canary yellow and just look at where I'm adding it. This is a feeling thing. I want you to be able to loosen up and just add the color where you feel the color is needed. Trust yourself. Trust your judgment. Trust what you already know. This isn't an exact science. Art and science are separated for a reason. Art is art. A lot of what makes art beautiful and original and stand out is the decisions that we make, is our own feeling that we put into our creation. For me, this is where the yellow is asking to be. So as you're coloring along with me, just place it where I'm placing it. And the muscle memory will help you understand why those colors are there. What is this yellow doing? It's kind of bringing out some of the detail, isn't it? And the whole contrast of this nice pale yellow against all the burgundy tones that we have together, they make everything just a little bit more cheerful, a little bit warmer. It was already warm in the pink tones, but now there's like warm sunlight in the picture. That's why it's here. It's not about, where does scientifically light fall. This is a fantasy coloring page. It's a anime kitsune drawing. She's not real. None of this is real or even remotely realistic, but the light is behaving in a realistic fashion. And finally, for the last touch, I am bringing in pure black to the darkest parts of the composition and to the parts that need to actually be black, like her eyelashes. So the eyelashes, the pupils, and now I'm bringing it in to the shadows of the hair. For those who have taken color theory, you guys know that what I'm doing right here on the hair is not making the hair black, but rather increasing the shade of burgundy that I've established on her hair. If you have not taken color theory yet, I think it's about time that you did. You're far enough along in your coloring skills that you're setting yourself back by not taking color theory. So at this point, if you've been with me for several months in the coloring club, I highly, highly recommend that your next investment, your next purchase be color theory. It goes a long way and you will understand all of these references to shades and tones of colors and full potential of colors. Notice that all of this black shade application is happening mostly in the center of our character. And notice what else is happening. I'm going to bring in these backlit fairies again. Notice how they are different from what we're doing here with our girl. The fairies had their definition almost completely removed from the coloring. They're practically silhouetted. There's no definition on the face. Nothing. It's just a dark character with a hair light with a very strong backlight. But not here. This character is clearly backlit. The light is very dramatic. She's still much darker in the center, but she's still very much readable. We can see the details of her eyes, of her face, of her mouth, of her nose, of her cheeks, even all the little details of her kimono and her mask. There's a lot of detail here, and there's a lot of color variation here. So even though it was scary to add all of those dark shadows, in the end, it all fell together with high definition. So you don't have to give up one for another. You don't have to give up all of the definition of your character's features to create a beautiful backlit effect. You can have the best of both worlds at the same time. And this is the living proof of it right here on the screen. But the full potential of those pencils has to be practiced. So now I'm just going to add a few more final details, making sure that the center of my character truly is the darkest part. I want to bring your attention one last time to her face and notice that it totally doesn't look dirty or sunburned or too dark or anything at all. It just looks like a normal face. So be brave, be bold. Color along with me the first time. Try to match my colors. Try to match the darkness of my colors. Remember, the full intensity, the full potential of your pencil is more important than the actual color that you choose. Go play, print out this page, do it the same way that I did it the first time. Take your time with it. Focus on the shading. Trade detail for effects. Notice I spent like half an hour working on her little belt, and now I'm covering all of that little detail, and it looks good. It looks really good. It looks more natural than if I had all of those little detail lines in her belt. Practice, practice, practice. Go along with me the first time, and then try it the second time with your own colors if you're not into this whole pink thing. So have fun, post work in progress shots, post your thoughts, post your struggles, post your successes, post everything. This is a club. We do best when we communicate, when we share. That way we learn together. I love you guys. Have fun with this. I'll see you in a month.